How's it going, Diablo player? So this is my early game Frozen Orb build guide, and this is a build you can transition right into after your leveling phase. So if you're leveling with Firewall and you hit like level 60 and you get your first item level 750 gear, just get yourself a Winterglass. This season we get littered with boss materials, so it shouldn't be a big deal to pick up your Winterglass. And then as soon as you have any Winterglass, you can start playing this build. You can get yourself some Asus boots, which makes the build substantially better, but it's certainly not required. Really all you need is any Winterglass to get this going. The footage you are seeing in the background is a tier 45 pit on the PTR that should be around the same than a tier 45 pit on live. The character there which is playing has no Paragon Board whatsoever. It only has 750 unmasterworked gear. So this is really the bare minimum. As you can see, it has 210 open Paragon points. So really this is the lowest end where you would be starting this build, and I'm just doing this to prove that you really don't need anything to get this build started. The strength of this build is that it naturally comes with a big damage boost, because you're gonna have a lot of stacks on Conjuration Mastery on this build, regardless of the nerfs. It comes with infinite mana out of the box, because you get a crazy amount of mana regeneration from Conjuration Mastery as well. It moves very fast through dungeons, because you get a crap ton of movement speed from your Conjuration Mastery as well. So overall, this is a very nice starter build, if not the best starter build for this season for Sorcerer. At this time, you probably know how this build works, like it has been all over the place for the past 2 seasons, so make sure to check the description down below and jump right to the section you are interested in, and also check the description for my early game Firewall leveling guide and all my other build guides coming up for Vessel of Hatred. So without further ado, let's take a look at the skill tree. The Frozen Orb skill tree didn't really change a whole lot since like forever, so we just put 2 into Firebolt, then we max out Frozen Orb into Destructive Frozen Orb. Again, we don't need the Vulnerable that is gonna be dealt by a Lightning Spear. Then we go into Elemental Dominance for the extra damage. We go for Teleport into Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. We max out Glass Cannon. We put 1 into Elemental Attunement. In the earlier builds, I would put 1 into Energy Focus just to get a little bit more uptime on your barrier. And then we go for Ice Armor into Shimmering Ice Armor here, because it's just a better synergy than the extra damage to crowd controlled in the early game. Then we go for Lucky Hit. Ice Blades into Summoned Ice Blades, Lightning Spear into Invoked Lightning Spear. We max out our defensive passives and Conjuration Mastery, obviously. And then we go Familiar into Invoked Familiar. So if you wanna not do the Fire Bolt enchantment, you can remove this Invoked Familiar and get Summoned Familiar, and then you can snapshot the Fire Familiar, but I wouldn't do this in a very early state of this build. This is probably more for mid-game. And then we go Inner Flames into Devouring Blaze here for the extra crit damage. We max out the cold passives, like always. We go for 1 into Fury Surge and 3 into Worms for the extra health regeneration. It really helps early game. And then we go Unstable Currents into Prime Unstable Currents. I'm not sure how many ranks in Unstable Currents we're going to actually need with Orange Herald. You might need to take some points out of Worms into Unstable Currents if you feel like you have too much downtime on it. And then 3 into Elemental Synergies and 3 into Evocation, and we go for Enlightenment. For the skills, in the very early game setup, where you actually don't need a Paragon Board or anything at all, we max out Frozen Orb and Ice Armor. We pretty much cast Ice Armor all the time, so we get extra defenses. Ice Blades we want to spam to keep our cooldowns nice and low and Conjuration count high. Same goes for Familiar. Spam it, because the cooldown comes off very quickly for Ice Blades. Unstable Currents, we should be able to cast it on cooldown because we use the Orange Herald. And then Teleport to move around faster. You always want to make far teleports in this build, right? So move your mouse cursor to the very end of the screen, to the very edge, and press Teleport. Don't waste this Teleport for like low range teleporting. And then, Frozen Orb and Firebolt enchantment. And this build still, as we're not snapshotting Familiar here, this is still the best enchantments you can choose. So then for the gear, we really don't have any gear requirements in this whatsoever, other than the Fractured Winterglass. So we want to get a helmet with Aspect of Disobedience, most likely. It's hard to fix armor early on, so Aspect of Disobedience really helps a lot with doing so. And you want to get maximum life on all of your gear pieces, and try to pick up mana per second, and cooldown reduction is also very nice. You want to get a defensive temper, always maximum life for ranks of worms, and crowd control duration is a good utility temper for this build. Then for our chest piece, we go Snowveiled Aspect. This gives us permanent unstoppable and a nice little damage reduction because we are casting ice armor all the time. Try to get intelligence, maximum life, and again mana per second, or +2 defensive skills is also nice. Again, we want to have maximum life temper or ranks of worms temper and crowd control duration again. Then on our gloves, we want to have ranks of Frozen Orb, attack speed, critical strike chance, and we want to have critical strike damage and utility. Again, doesn't really matter so much. We can choose barrier generation, for example, and shredding blades gives us extra damage. Then on our boots, we want to go for aspect of Orange Herald. For our pants, sorry, we're going to go for aspect of Orange Herald. We're going to have intelligence, maximum life armor. Try to get greater FX armor if you can. Again, armor fixing is the hardest stuff to do early on. And for defensive, again, bonus ranks to worms or maximum life. And utility, again, a barrier generation works just fine. Then for your boots, if you can get Asus, it really helps a lot. So try to focus on getting Asus as fast as possible. If you don't have Asus yet, don't sweat it. You can just play regular boots with, a movement speed aspect and just put, for example, mana per second, intelligence, health, or movement speed, something on there. So really, it's up to you, but I would try to get Asus as fast as possible. Then for our weapon, we want to go for like a wand with intelligence, critical strike damage, and maximum life. We want to temper crit damage and chance of frozen orb projectiles to cast twice. And we're going to play the aspect of frozen orbit. Or offhand, we want to go cooldown reduction, critical strike chance, intelligence, again, critical strike damage, temper, and frozen orb projectiles to cast twice. And we're going to put our Swell aspect here for even more damage during ice armor. For first ring, we're going to get Conceited Aspect, we're going to get attack speed, critical strike chance, critical strike damage. You want to temper critical strike damage and resource cost reduction. So in the very early game, it really helps to temper resource cost reduction. Later on, if you have better gear and masterworking and stuff like that, resource cost reduction doesn't really matter so much anymore. And then we have one more ring with Accelerating Aspect here, with critical strike chance, attack speed, intelligence again, critical strike damage temper, and resource cost reduction temper. And last but not least, we have our Winterglass. So you really need any Winterglass. The rolls on it do not really matter whatsoever. You can play this build as soon as you get any Winterglass. And this season we're gonna get littered with boss materials. So it should really not be a big issue to pick up yourself a Fractured Winterglass. For the early game Paragon board, I have it with level 15 glyphs here. So let's start with the early game. So these survivability nodes are optional. You don't need them if you have no problem staying alive. We pick up all the non-physical damage since it's very important. Then in our first board, we pick Elementalist. Again, we just want the non-physical damage and boost them a little bit by the Elementalist glyph. Mainly at the very beginning, the Paragon glyphs are fairly weak and we are just looking for the multipliers. Then our first board is going to be Frigid Fate. We pick up the 60% multiplier here. We get some damage reduction. And we put in our Winterglyph here again for the multiplier. Winterglyph is one of the strongest multipliers with Frozen Orb. It has an 18% multiplier inbuilt. And it also gives us some nice extra damage here from the non-physical damage and vulnerable damage. And then, we go into Icefall for our next board. This is going to be another multiplier for us. This gives a little bit of lucky hit chance, which is nice with Frozen Orb. And we put in our Destruction Glyph here for the extra crit damage. And then let's go over to the next board. That's going to be the Fundamental Release. Again, we pick this for the 30% multiplier here. We put in our Conjurer Glyph. I assume in the very beginning with Frozen Orb, Conjurer Glyph will still be good because our conjurations, especially the familiars and stuff like that, are gonna last longer. But in the later game, we're probably gonna get rid of Conjurer here. And we just pick up the damage and the damage reduction nodes here if we have the extra points. If not, we're probably gonna skip these nodes to go for the fourth board. So the fourth board is going to be the Enchantment Master here. We're gonna pick our Control Glyph for the very beginning. And this is just because, again, it has the biggest 20% multiplier for an early game build, which is really nice. And we pick up these nodes here since they give non-physical damage and attack speed. So let's switch over to the mid-game focused version. So this, I assume you're going to have like level 50 to 100 glyphs. So we're going to change the glyphs a little bit in this version, right? So we're going to use Tactician in our first board because we mainly want to boost the non-physical damage nodes here because they triple dip with Enlightenment. And then our next board is going to be Frigid Fate. And, you know, we're going to put the Winter Glyph here again. And this hasn't really changed a whole lot. We just added the lucky hit here and, you know, got some maximum life. And also we pick up these damage nodes here. Then we go for Icefall. And we still run Destruction Icefall. And nothing really changed in this board whatsoever. And then we go back to our Enchantment Master board here. So now we switch this to Elementalist since this seems to be much stronger than, you know, getting the other glyph here. And, you know, we pick up these nodes. So this is also not very different than before. And then last but not least, we still play the Conjurer glyph here. I assume at some point Conjurer is going to fall off. So you're going to probably replace Conjurer by Unleash. I would assume as soon as you get your Conjurations up, you have enough attack speed to get your Conjurations up, drop Conjurer and go into Unleash here. For Mercenary, we pretty much play the same stuff in all the builds right now. So we always play Subo with Seeker because this is going to mark mobs on the map, which is going to be very, very important. And also marking the mobs for 50% resource return is just a very, very nice ability. Then we choose Molotov and Share a Drink. Like, these don't even matter. We don't need burning damage. So, you know, we might as well just get some extra healing potions. We do this just to go into Snipe, which does some good damage, I would assume. But in the end, we just want to get Ambusher, because Ambusher basically says everything which has been hit by the basic ability of Subo gets, you get a 20% increased lucky hit chance. So lucky hit chance, I feel like, is the best thing we can pick up in this build from our Mercenary. And then for our reinforcement, we basically take Bloodthirst, which gives us 10% extra attack speed, and we trigger that with Frozen Orb.